Blessings and peace be with you. Welcome to Worship with High Country United Church of Christ, where we say every Sunday you are welcome here in whatever state, whatever condition you have arrived. Today, I'm almost too late. I've been waiting all day for a rains to come. It's getting dark and you might not can see me. And I wanted the thunder to happen. Because sometimes we love thunder and sometimes it evokes something within us, and you can hear it a little bit rumbling behind me. This is where we ended last week. The garden is planted, and now the hope is that these roots will grow deep, that they will take hold of the soil that is there, and that they will find purchase. We start a new worship series today called Courageous Faith, Rising and Resisting in a Time of Fear, or otherwise known as courageous living, living out of a courage. And our baseline story is of Jonah, a prophet who didn't want to live a life of courage, ultimately. He was put into places where he wasn't comfortable. He attempted to turn and go the other way. And, well, life has a tendency to continue to pull us into places where we don't always want to go. And sometimes, when we are ready to get there, when we are honest, when we understand that we need to be reconciled with our own selves, then we can find that life of abundance. But make no mark about it, it is not always easy or simple, and it definitely takes some courage to get there. So today we begin very simply with this idea of, are you ready to ask those questions? How are you finding abundance? What is keeping you possibly locked up in the belly of a fish or even in a tomb? For we seek to be an Easter people, living resurrected always, knowing that to emerge out of a tomb is kind of like plants finding a new spot when a cat comes along and seeks to dig around you. It's a little bit scary from time to time. And interestingly enough, that cat's name is Moses, who took a people out of bondage and offered them a life of freedom. And they too, at a point in their journey, said, let us just go back because it's far too hard out here. In these times, I invite us to center. You're about to be immersed into a wonderful waterfall, nice and gentle. We're going to have some moments of just quiet as that water literally is allowed to wash over you. I'm going to invite you to light your candle if you have one. And as you focus on that water coming down off those rocks, may you allow the love of God to wash over you, opening your spirits, opening your hearts to hear a word for you this day. And may you not turn and go the opposite direction. May you turn and go with it. Come, worship with us this day.
Spirit of creation, you move in and through us like breath. When our circumstances feel suffocating, you draw us back into the rhythms of life that were before us and will be beyond us. Rhythms that are slow, rhythms that accept times of death and times of rebirth, rhythms that persevere but don't force, rhythms that embrace change, rhythms that encourage every individual in the direction of the whole's well-being. Together, every creature and creation yearning for life, every blade of growing grass breaking through soil, reaching for the light of the sun, every mother bear watching over her cubs day and night, protecting vulnerable life, every saint refusing to compromise on the dignity of your people, and fleshing radical love. When our schedules and our machines and our media and our words make us forget that we are creatures among creation, vulnerable flesh, beloved parts of a whole, may we find you again in our inhales and in our exhales, pacing our breath with the spirit of life that has always been pulsing through creation, connecting everything that is across millennia. In our striving for life, we are not the first and we will not be the last. May our beating hearts and every rise and fall of our lungs remind us that we are never alone, not for a single breath. Amen.
Hello and welcome to Kids Connection. Are you ready for school? Are you ready for summer to end? I guess you have different answers for those questions. There was a character in the Bible named Jonah who was asked that question. Are you ready to leave the land that you've known and go to a land that is totally foreign to you, where you may not know the language, you definitely won't know the people? Are you ready to go there and spread God's love? Well, it turns out Jonah was not ready, and he ran away from that question for a while. Last week, we had grandparent camp here at our house, and it's a time for the cousins to get together once a year. And so my grandchildren came up. There was Jerica, 18, Jack, who's 15, Cora, who is 12, and Blake, who is 10. And they came to stay a week. Now, in years past, we've built some walking trails on our property through the woods, and we've named the trails for dogs that we've owned in our life. And so they, this year, wanted to do something a little more special than just preparing or keeping the trails clean. So they said to Papa Bernie, "Are you ready to help us build a tree house?" To which Papa Bernie was an affirmative no. He wasn't ready for that. For one thing, he didn't have the wood necessary out in his shop. He didn't have scrap wood enough to do that. And they would need power tools. And how in the world are you going to get power tools out in the middle of the woods to build something? Plus, he wasn't sure he wanted to supervise such an activity. And so they talked with Jack's father, Matt, and he was kind of the same opinion that it was too much of a project to undertake. So I could tell that they were very disappointed. And I mentioned to Jerica, I said, "I know you're disappointed about this, but they're thinking it's not a really good idea." And she said, "You know, when somebody tells me I can't do something, it makes me want to do it even more." So back to the computer she went, and they found a plan for a tree platform. And she took those plans, did the measurement where they wanted it to go between 3 trees they had found, prepared a prototype of popsicle sticks and straws. They actually built it and showed it to Papa Bernie and said, "Are you ready to help us build a tree house, a tree platform?" So off they go to Lowe's and they buy the wood necessary. Lowe's cut some of the wood for them that was to their measurements, and when they came back and they needed some other pieces cut, they used a power saw up at the shop, loaded everything on the truck, drove it to the edge of the woods, took it out, took it to the site, and began building the tree platform, which became Fort Boone. And here are the pictures of that process. So, are you ready? Was a question that initially had a lot of problems associated with it, but it became one that the problems were overcome, and yeah, they were ready to build this platform. And now they have a special trail marker that they will always remember building and will always go down, I'm sure, and add something else to it every year. Jonah had the same revelation. He finally answered the problems that were facing him about leaving his homeland and going to a different country, and he goes to the new country and begins to tell people of God's love. So Bible truths kind of work themselves into our lives from time to time, even yet. I have a song for you. It goes like this. I want to be ready, I want to be ready, I want to be ready to, and you get to fill in the blank. The last phrase is da 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 da, but you can figure out what you want to answer that question with. I want to be ready to do what this week that maybe you think you couldn't do, or it's not something you want to do, and you change your mind. Have a good week.
Sunday morning, sun is shining, flowers blooming everywhere, birds are singing.
This is the story of Jonah. God came to Jonah and said, "Arise, go to Nineveh. It's a great city. Please tell them that they aren't listening, though. Their ears are closed and they can't understand what I need them to do to find abundant life." Now, prophets are people who come so close to God, and God comes so close to them that they know what God is telling them to do. Then they go and do it. However, Jonah turned and went the opposite direction. Instead, he found a ship going to Tarshish in Spain. It was as far from Nineveh as one could go. Suddenly, a great storm broke out. The sailors on the ship were so afraid, they all prayed, got down on their knees. They threw everything they were carrying into the ocean to make the ship light so that it would float. Now, a prophet is someone who helps people discover what is the best thing to do. The sailors went to look for Jonah and asked him what was going on. Do you know where they found him? He was asleep in the bottom of the boat. The captain found him and commanded him to call on God to save them. All Jonah did was climb up onto the deck of the boat. The people were even more afraid. They decided to cast lots to see whom God must be angry at. They wanted to throw that person overboard to get rid of them. Now, a prophet is someone who can speak for God to open our eyes, and Jonah still did not speak. The sailors asked who he was. Jonah told them that he was one who understood himself as sacred and holy, the one who offered his voice upon hearing from God, and he had not spoken, and the sailors were so afraid. They knew that he was trying to flee from God. The sea grew even more troubled, so Jonah said, "Just throw me into the ocean, and the storm will stop." So they threw Jonah in, and suddenly everything got quiet. The sea was calm. A prophet is someone who brings people close to God by what they say, what they do. Jonah had said nothing. But when the sea grew calm, the sailors all fell down and they said, "Praises be to Yahweh." A prophet is someone who is so close to God that they can hear what God is offering to them to do, however scary it might be. When Jonah was thrown into the water, he was neither close nor far from God. He was sinking. And as he sank, a great fish swam up and swallowed him. Jonah was in the belly of this great fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Jonah began to pray, and the fish began to feel very strange. It grew sicker and sicker. Finally, the great fish swam to the shore and vomited out Jonah onto the dry land. And a second time, God spoke to Jonah, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and open your mouth. Say to the great people that they're not doing what would bring them abundant life. They need to make some changes. Maybe they need to put their masks on and follow physical distancing, because there is a sickness over their land." This time, Jonah went to Nineveh. He cried out to the people of Nineveh that they were not doing what they should be doing to find life, and God had offered them abundant things that they might be liberated and know a life free from oppression. And God had said, actually, that this oppression would destroy them if they did not change their ways. A prophet is someone who is overjoyed when people open to new life. A prophet is someone who is joyful and celebrates when people change their ways. And indeed, the people of Nineveh listened, they turned, and they began to do what had been offered for new life to come to them. And in even the king and the queen actually changed their ways. They too followed the directives that had been given to them. And the creatures in the field, they too were finding abundance and life. And indeed, the city was not destroyed. And because of this, Jonah became very angry. He had wanted the city to be destroyed. And these people were not even people whom had been loved. They had found depression, and instead they were finding new life. And Jonah went away and sat on a hill and sulked. And God came to Jonah and said, "Why are you so angry?" And as Jonah sat there, God caused a plant to grow and give Jonah shade as he sat in the hill in the sun. And then one night God sent a worm to attack the plant. It withered away and died. And the next day when the sun rose, a sultry east wind came, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah so that he was faint. Jonah grew angry about the death of the plant. And God asked again to Jonah, "Why are you so angry about the plant?" Jonah said, "I am angry enough to die." God said, "You pity the plant, but you did nothing for it. You did not cause it to grow. You did not care for it. Should I not pity Nineveh, that great city where there are more than 120,000 good people and all their livestock?" This is the story of Jonah. I wonder what part of this story you like the best. I wonder what part of the story you might consider as the most important part. I wonder where you find yourself in the story. What part of the story touches your heart? I wonder if in the 21st century there's any part of the story that we can leave out and still have all of the story that we need for today. And I wonder how you would finish this story. Oh, well, let us be together as one. God of the morning and of the night, of the rain and of the blue skies, of deserts and of mountains, of oceans and of dry places. We come together literally across space and time, across geologies. And we trust and believe that you are calling us together, and that as we offer our hearts as one, as we wonder about this thing called life and who you are and who we are, we trust and believe that all the meditations occurring in this space and time, that they are holy and sacred, and may they be pleasing in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen and amen. Well, Reverend Dr. Emily Heath, welcome to my proverbial table this day. And you are in Exeter, New Hampshire?
Yes, yeah, I'm in Exeter, New Hampshire, which is about an hour from Boston. We're down in the southeastern part of New Hampshire near Portsmouth. And I'm sitting in my office here at the church. I know you're compared to us, you're a young church.
You are.
Yeah, so we were founded in 1638.
Oh my God.
So we're coming up on 400 years. But I am from the South and know a lot of UCC churches down there that are newer. And it's not how old the church is; it's what's going on now. So.
And the next month, at the end of August, will be this church's 18th birthday or anniversary, whichever one of those terms you want to use. So I'm really excited that a church that has been around for a long time is going to be in conversation with a church that is relatively new. And in this time of pandemic, your book, Courageous Faith, Rising and Resisting in a Time of Fear, just is speaking to us. And you wrote that book a few years ago.
Yeah, I started writing the book in 2015. So before resistance was sort of in our common lexicon as a people, and of course COVID was not even a thought back then.
Right.
But it turns out that there's maybe some relevance there for the current time.
Just a little bit. And how we're going to take that book is we're going to take the next 6 Sundays and just go chapter by chapter in your first part, which I really appreciate also that you're weaving a 12-step spirituality throughout that. You know, and the first part of that is asking the question is, are you ready? Or where are you in that process of making a decision to move forward? And interestingly enough, here we are in the 4th month of a pandemic, and our health officials have just said we got to shut it back down, right? We've attempted to open up. We think we should open up economically, our schools, but we might not have been ready to open up. And so what does that word ready mean in the global sense? You know, and I'm always wrestling with a personal sense of readiness, maybe in my own understanding. You know, after the murder of George Floyd 2 months ago, you know, am I finally ready to look at my white privilege?
Yeah.
And 4 months into a pandemic when I'm feeling listless, and I've heard that from a number of my congregants of, I think, some of the weight of it. Am I ready to actually look at my own mental health and to know that my mental health must be woven into my spiritual health? So there's a number of pieces, your first chapter of Ready, and the story of Jonah and the whale just delights me so.
Yeah. I think Ready is, you know, we are at a crossroads in so many ways right now. We have COVID, and we have this virus that's really making us question, what does it mean to take responsibility for our neighbors? And we're talking about rights and responsibilities. And I think what Christians can bring to that is we can talk about what it means to love your neighbor. Now, people of every faith can do that. But this idea that we really have to be ready to think about what it means to make sacrifices for one another. Now, at the same time, compounding that, we're at this sort of important crossroads where we seem more ready to really engage questions about race and justice than we as a country have for a long time. Now we're really having to ask, are we ready to ask the big questions? That's something that my church, you know, we've been talking about. So, you know, like I said, I live up here in New England. It is commonly thought that there is no racism in New England by people who live in New England. And I would tell them, I see evidence of racism here all the time. In fact, I think in some ways the South has had to wrestle with the legacy of racism in a way that Northerners never have.
Right.
And yeah, so I'm grateful because right now my church is really ready to have these conversations, which I think before we were in that paradox of thinking we were fine, and now we're realizing how much isn't. And you know, I say in the book, you're as sick as your secrets, and another way to put that is you're as sick as what you cannot deal with. And this country, one of our secrets is we have not dealt with race and equity, and we're going to continue to be sick until we deal with it. You know, and so I think whenever we're having these wholly important conversations, we are getting more healthy. We're getting better. But some places are not ready to have them. Some will have these conversations in a very half-hearted way. And that's why it's important to have the hard and sometimes really painful.
You know, I really appreciate that you're having those words of where it's a time to have the hard conversations. And I think sometimes when we hear a biblical story, we want to take them literally. You know, Jonah was sucked up by the wheel because God was sending him to have a hard conversation that he didn't want to have.
Right.
And so he ran away from that hard conversation and caused a bevy of other challenges for himself and others.
Yeah.
And until we're really ready to say, okay, it is time to have that hardened conversation, we won't ever be released from the tomb, be released from the belly of a whale.
Yeah. I think a good example of this is saying all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. It's easy to say all lives matter because everyone's like, well, sure, all lives matter. It's harder for some people to say Black Lives Matter because it means you have to have a hard conversation about the fact that Black lives don't matter equally in this country right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a hard truth. And that is something that, you know, when people tell you, oh, I don't see color, I don't care if you're black, white, purple, like that's such a, you know, it's just not true. We all see color and we should see color and we should celebrate color. And we should talk about what it means that the color of our skin impacts the way we make it through in this country. But it's a tough conversation for folks, and one a lot of folks they'd rather be in the belly of that whale than have. Right. Yeah.
Well, Reverend Dr. Emily Heath, thank you for your time on a Friday, and
thank you.
May reconvene.
Yeah.
And may these words and these opportunities to be in dialogue, may they offer hope and meaning to someone that is hearing to them. In the spirit of Bill Rogers, we have been welcoming diverse and different theologians to our table each week. We will continue to do this for the next 3 or 4 weeks, minimally, as we seek to deepen our spirituality and we seek to understand and evolve our own theology, searching the depths of who we are to reflect on who and whose we are. We will continue to have questions. We will continue to wonder and ponder together, rubbing up against each other to sharpen our own understanding of abundant life. This week, there'll be 2 conversations for you to tap into that will continue for the next 6 weeks. One of those will be on dismantling racism, and the other one will be on digging into our own mental health understanding. You are welcome and encouraged to join one or both of those. Here now ways to join these conversations.
Over the past couple of months in our sermon times and in our prayers, we've been tackling the injustice of racism and talking about race and white privilege a little bit. This week we decided to dig a little deeper in that. So for 6 weeks, Terry Clevenger, Kimberly Banks Brown, and I will be hosting a time where we can talk deeper about racism and the ways in which we can engage with our world better, how we can learn about racism better, and also how we can combat anti-Blackness and that in our society. So join us this week. It's going to be Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Each week it's going to be Tuesday at 7 o'clock that we meet. This week we're inviting you, as we go on to this theme of enough is enough, of starting the conversation, we're inviting you to bring forward all of the questions that you have, whether they're big or small, whether you've kind of already grappled with it a little bit or you just want to learn the very beginnings of it. Bring those questions with you. Write those down this week, and on Tuesday we will compile all those questions and talk about the basis of our conversation, and then in the weeks to follow move into addressing some of those questions, learning more and to be better community members and better neighbors to our folks in our community.
Let's get together to increase our wisdom. At HCUCC, we celebrate that we are an open and affirming congregation, meaning that we welcome into full life and ministry people of all sexual orientations, gender expressions, and gender identities. For some time now, we have been considering what it would mean for us to expand our welcome as a WISE congregation. Remember that WISE stands for welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and engaged with all people and the people who love them, no matter where they are at a given point in time on the spectrum of mental health and mental illness. During these 6 weeks of worship, we are exploring what it means to rise in courageous faith. During these 6 weeks, we will also gather during the week for a deeper dive into what it means to be wise as we rise. Each week, we will have a 10 to 15 minute table talk to consider the theme of the week with the lens of being a wise congregation as we rise. As you know, this week's worship theme is Readiness for Courageous Faith. We will examine 2 questions about readiness with specific attention to our mental health needs and differences. First, what does it mean to live with courageous faith in our world, including with our mental health needs and differences? And second, if I live courageously, what is demanded of me? And if our church truly welcomes all with courage, what is demanded of us? And what are the barriers? Watch the listserv emails, Facebook, and Instagram for announcements of who will be part of the table talks each week and for information needed to access the Zoom meeting. After the table talk, we will break into small Zoom breakout rooms for all who want to stay for that to examine these questions together more fully and deeply as a community. We will meet on Wednesdays at 6:30. See you then.
We finish where I started. I wore this shirt particularly today because there are days that it actually takes courage to wear it. It's big and bold and bright. And it says it's just about love. And I'll offer these words to you that when life feels big, and you're not sure if you're ready to go into that conversation, into that situation, to make that decision to live a life of liberation, know that at the core of it all, it is about love. In this series, for these next weeks, you're going to hear this prayer that we finish on. It's by German theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, who is forefather of our denomination. And commonly known, it's known as the Serenity Prayer that those of our brothers and sisters in recovery know quite well. And it has several versions. So as we go throughout this series, you may hear a few of those versions. As we conclude our time here this day, hear this prayer for you. Good and gracious Creator of us all, give us the courage to make those alterations that are needed. Offer us the serenity to accept those things which cannot be helped, and the insight or the wisdom to know the difference. Go with these words. Amen and amen.
Been rotting, I do.